today I have prepared a talk on materiality of digitality, and also to give you a little bit of context how I ended up working with topics on the verge or at the crossroads between video games, digital media, and sustainability. A couple of years ago, I had the chance to attract a research project. This is, if you're interested at some point, that's the first link, the Greening Games EU project. This is an Erasmus Plus project, which means that in this project, we're actually mainly looking at the didactic side of things. So asking ourselves, if we teach about, climate crisis and video games to our students at very different types of departments, and we're all here coming from kind of different angles, whether it's, game development or media and game studies or culture studies or a philological institute, what do we actually teach? How do we do that? And I don't have to say this in our company here, because we're all very much aware of that topic. And some of us, like Sebastian Möhring, for instance, have been in that thematic field for quite a while. And but it's quite a challenge because it's so interdisciplinary. In video games, and I say it quite often actually, video games as total works of art encompass in themselves as a, let's say, work of art or a product or whatever we want to call them. There's so many intersections there that it's almost mind-boggling to kind of focus and choose one. But what actually kept me interested the most throughout this kind of, say, meandering in that project was always this material side of things. And I want to start with a little, well, not sure if it's a story, but it's kind of a more narrative angle. Is this working? Yes, okay. So, yeah, it was high summer 2022, and as you can probably remember, in many regions of Europe and worldwide, temperatures reached record heights. France, for instance, suffered under unprecedented wildfires with over 70 or 62,000 hectares of flora burned by the end of August 2022. I choose this as a starting point for myself also because at that time in the summer of 2022, I actually was in France, not far away from those fires at the campsite, not knowing whether we will have to move and flee and how will that happen, or maybe we will be spared and the fires kind of stay 50 kilometers straight line from us away. So of course this happens more and more, but that's this kind of specific setting that I have chose, 2022. Meanwhile, and it seems almost uncanny, players of Riders Republic, a major multiplayer sports video game developed and published by Ubisoft in Annecy, so the studio is in Annecy in the middle of the Alps, engaged in digital reforestation. It's the same summer, 2022. They planted virtual trees in dedicated location of the game's map, bringing to life an entirely new forested area. It stayed in the game for others to experience long after the event had come to an end. And this event, this reforestation, has culminated in the first in-game climate march. And for that climate march, as you can see in that photo here, the players were equipped with green t-shirts, banners, megaphones, drums, and so they could creatively express their support for the climate cause. If this is actually the case, this is all, that's the PR story as well, of course. Whether those players were really climate conscious, or they were playing with it, or whether they were really doing this, and whether that changed anything outside of the game world, nobody has, of course, followed up. But that project was conceptualized in 2021 during a Green Game Jam, and you might be familiar with that concept. It has existed since 2019, and those Green Game Jams worldwide are organized by the Playing for the Planet Alliance, and that's an environmental program of the United Nations. Does it ring a bell? Have you stumbled upon that? Yeah. I mean, in the games industry, it's quite big. So what they do is actually the Plan for the Planet Alliance, they invite companies, and by now there's dozens of companies. If you go to their website, you will see also AAA companies. And they make that game jam, and they encourage them to do something they called green activations in their existing games. So this is an example of this type of green activation. This means that those AAA companies are encouraged to use their existing games, which already have a huge player base, to try to think about the extra content, a level or something, some kind of modification that could potentially, of course, and that's the whole point here, something that could reach millions of players, worldwide, and then magically bring about change. And the gameplay director of Riders Republic, with whom I had the pleasure to lead an interview within the framework of that Greening Games project, I very quickly mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, something like this. It's of course cut out of the context. Delivering positive messages is the future of video games. I want to make a little footnote here, because usually those types of statements sound very lofty. And we, I guess, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us tend to have this kind of suspicious, immediate reaction to it. Maybe if I have time at the very end, I will tell you a little bit more about those interviews, and they're not the center of the presentation. But in this case, we are actually, I was very surprised, and I don't want to say, I will say it because there's, for the lack of a better word, I don't like, humbled. But this team in NSC, including the gameplay director, they are really ecologically conscious beings in their everyday lives. So that was a surprise I was not counting with when I came to this interview. But anyway, we have talked a lot about it yesterday within a slightly different context. Yes, games, as you know, any other medium, they can carry different types of cultural values. They can mirror, and they actually do, the values of cultural values, the current cultural values, of course, of our societies, depending what games we're looking at. Well, potentially they can shift cultural values as well. Well, it's not a magical shift, it lasts. But this is not exactly where I want to go, as you probably know, if you have read the abstract. Well, games are also media, and maybe even predominantly media, they're digital, that are material. And they rely literally and metaphorically on the earthly matter. This is what I want us to have a look at in this presentation. And this contradiction, right, between, on the one hand, yes, great products in which you can pack different types of green activations to reach billions of players worldwide, at the same time, knowing that this medium in itself needs very often slave labor, extraction of mineral resources, of course, energy, lots of energy, server farms, and so on and so forth. This is a certain, almost unsolvable type of contradiction. And I was very surprised to find that this contradiction has been also mentioned in this document, which is relatively recent. I think it's November 2023. It is a document that is written predominantly for and by the games industry. Of course, as you will see, we have enough time, luckily, in this format, so we can actually read it. This contradiction, or this paradox that they also kind of admit that exists, is a little bit differently rhetorically packed, but let's have a look. And I found this actually coincidentally, but I was really happy, because sometimes we tend to see in research, right? We see contradictions, paradox, dialectics, and then we're like, but hey, this is actually something that is, yeah, very seriously referred to not only by the academics. Okay, but let's have a look at the rhetorics. So of course, on the side of things that video games shift cultural values, it's quite lofty here. Video games are a uniquely interactive form of art and entertainment and have great potential to reach more than 3 billion players. Well, yes, they are a mass entertainment medium. Counting through storytelling, raising awareness and community action. After all, we love video games for the sense of wonder, the promise of new experiences, the challenge and achievement of taking down a final boss, and probably above all else, video gaming community and connect okay, I have missed some part of text, but anyway. These are the qualities that can make video games so powerful in the fight with climate change, as if the climate change was this kind of also an interesting rhetorical trick in most of those types of documents. It's the other, it's not us. It's the external boss that you have to fight, right? And we can do it. Yes, we can do it. Okay, I'll leave it there. The other side, the material problematic of the medium. Video games are part of the largest entertainment industry today. Yes, we know they're bigger than Hollywood. So many research papers start with that. Producing video games relies on a complex supply chain of artists, programmers, producers, engineers, and many more. Okay, yes, labor. And playing video games requires technology. Computers, video game consoles, mobile gaming devices like smartphones and tablets, TVs, sound systems, and so on, data centers and the internet. All of these parts require energy to do their job, and generating energy means some amount of carbon emissions are produced. On top of the energy used to run video gaming devices, there are carbon emissions from the production and manufacturing of these devices as well. Okay, it's relatively, the tone is quite informative, but it's still surprising that it found its place there. I will tell you later on why. Okay. So video games and environmental issues kind of entangle in those many ways. This kind of binary, it's easy to think, right, in terms of contradictions, paradoxes, binaries. It's of course more complicated than that. And in the Greening Games project, what we're doing, and it's a form of interpretation, of course, to make this a little bit more clear, we're looking at 4 different categories or buckets. Games infrastructures, as you can imagine, this is like my part of the job. Again, infrastructures, I chose that particular term here, but that's of course this material side of things we're talking about today. Games cultures, games production, development, and games content, much more design-oriented, so those 4 perspectives. And they kind of map a little bit into, again, an interpretation, but maybe a little bit helpful into what we could think of as humanities-driven game studies and then game development. And games infrastructures is specifically interesting because with this hat on, we can look at games as, I guess that's the best way I found by now to summarize this, as objects of nature, as opposed to games as objects of culture. This is something we're discussing without end. So just think about it really like, I talk a lot, but think games as objects of nature relying on material resources. It's as simple as it gets. And moving on, I will start with an object. This is actually from a talk I was asked to give to a very different type of audience. We had 10 to 15 minutes, relatively short. The audience were game developers, not game researchers. And this is a type of topic that you can imagine is not easy to kind of put across to game developers and to make it something that's also relevant to them. We were asked to bring an object. Fortunately, I wanted to bring it, actually give it to you to touch. It makes a lot of sense, but it stayed in the office in Cologne. So. But what is this basically? And why did I choose this object to, but then start that talk on the materiality of the medium for the developers? What do you think? Where is it? It's a weird thing. Sure, that's is it what? It's not oil probably, but you're right. I mean, there's something natural here, and of course something, well, human made. Most probably metal. I found this in
ammunition, like a shell from a cannon.
I have no idea exactly what could be.
Left in the sea for a long time, and those shells
wrapped around it. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it's a canon. It's definitely some kind of metal or metal alloy. I found this in Dundee when I was still working in Scotland. It is a post-industrial city, and so there are beaches. There's a lot of nature there, but they're very close to the ship, what was back then a shipyard. And I found this back then, of course, not connected to this topic. I just picked it up, and I like stones and many different things. I just bring them things back from whenever I am. And this one was just weird enough, so I took this. But today I really think about this object, and I have it on my desk because what it is at the end of the day is an amalgam. It's a blend of nature and culture. It's a blend of nature and technology. And very often we like to, again, think about the two as binaries, right? But they are not. They are, in fact, and this object really kind of shows it literally, they are interconnected. There is no technology and no culture without nature. But there is nature without technology and culture, by the way, right? So again, this as our something to keep at the back of our heads. Okay, so fine. Video games are as much objects of technoculture as they are of nature. And as immaterial and virtual and clean as they are portrayed within the framework of, like this post-industrial capitalism, termed by Maxwell Miller, they're literally made out of natural resources and material labor. Digital media, of course, large video games are part of it, so it's a larger problem. They rely on technologies and production dynamics and make those media possible in the first place. So where to start, basically? And I thought this quote was kind of always resonating with me. Why not starting? There were many ways to start the story. I started with a fire, then I moved to an object, to an amalgam of tech and nature. But we can also think of starting the story with disenchantment, basically, right? Those media are magical. This is also a word that kind of appeared in a different context in those days, this symposium. They're enchanting us. And maybe the start, as Maxwell Miller say, is to break that enchantment that inflames the popular and elite passion for media and technologies. And the materiality of that medium usually remains hidden behind flashy interfaces and screens. This is something that we have to, and they're powerful. We like them. We like to play with them, of course. But the disenchanting technology in video games can be done, for instance, by telling stories of this, resource extraction and exploitation. This is, what do you think? What is this? What kind of mineral is dug out from Earth in this picture? The one and only that we need for everything that includes a battery. And in these days, even a mobile phone, everything. Yeah, totally. Lithium and, even more importantly, 17 mines in Africa, 15 owned by China.
Cobalt.
Yes, cobalt. Yeah. And this is a wonderful book. It's actually written for a popular audience. But the author of this book is a historian by trade, and he works with ethnographic methods, and he has been writing books about modern forms of slavery. And it's really eye-opening. It has nothing to do with video games, and all to do, of course, as well with video games and digital technology, because all of those pieces of technology need this material. The story can also, maybe before I move on to that, I had to bring this as an example. It's the only game, now really thinking away from those green activations and big AAA games implanting some green content. It's the only game, you might have know it, by Molindustria from 2011, that actually used the medium of a game. It was a game developed for mobile phones to criticize the resource extraction needed in order, and the slave work and child labor needed in order to make a mobile phone possible in the first place. The story of disenchantment can, of course, lead us to the overwhelming production and consumption of data. This is also by now a little bit old. These numbers I was looking up, these are some of them 2019. So of course it's growing, but I think it kind of gives us a little bit of a picture, right? And all of that data needs to be archived somewhere. It's flowing, it's increasing amount of data needs real infrastructure, partially an old telephone and infrastructure from the 1990s. This is also, predominantly what the internet is, lots of cables. Okay, so materiality of data, they're very material. Wonderful sources, if you're interested in such subjects, are reports by Greenpeace, probably the only independent types of reports. And data centers there have been framed as the factories of the digital age. And it actually is true. It's not even a metaphor. This is also quite a telling example, just to see, again, numbers pretty abstract, but the contrast makes quite of a statement, right? How much data was consumed, estimations. These are estimations in 2003. How much is consumed every day? That's again by 2019, because the report is a couple of years old. Massive amounts of data. And with the ideas of the metaverse, you can imagine what happens then. By now, the internet is just an emulation of a text medium, mostly, still websites. But if it becomes an emulation of a video medium, then we have a problem. Materiality of hardware, wonderful work by investigative journalism. In this case, also in collaboration with two material scientists from, I think, University of Oxford, who literally took apart PlayStation 4, bit by bit, looking at its composition. I usually use this material to teach, to talk about this material side of things with the students. It's really revealing. Also quite has quite a literary language to kind of describe the PlayStation 4. We usually don't think about it that way. Look at this. Looks more like headquarters of a galactic government. Its secrets, though, couldn't be more terrestrial, originating deep within Earth's crust and at the hands of workers across the globe. Can recommend this journalist piece. And of course, there are many more minerals. I just give here examples and kind of I'm scratching the ground here. There's gold and tin and many more things. Materiality of hardware, and I have to just bring this here, and of course software. Actually, there's maybe if we should actually think there's almost no difference between one and the other. There was already somebody. It's a little puzzle, a little challenge for us here, who wrote that there is no software. Do you remember? Very well known and quoted in German media theory, and I think in Poland as well.
It's Kittler.
Yes, if I had candies, you would get one. It's Kittler, yeah. But just also kind of thinking, what are interesting, theoretical frameworks to think about the topic of materiality of that medium. And I think this is perhaps also a great starting point. There is no software. This medium is material through and through. I will skip this one. I want to show you one example, which I usually also show to my students when we talk about this. Doing like let's say, a very short comparative analysis, and starting with the device use. I read a lot of those reports that are also produced by the games industry. And most of the time what you see there, and this is not surprising for us, is that kind of statement that the biggest hotspot of energy consumption is the device use. Well, in other words, it's the user, right? The end user is responsible, and their consumption for the product, not the production side of things, not the production of a console, the use of the console. That's a little bit surprising, you might think. But I decided to have a look into that and correlate some numbers. This is something that I'm not able to gather on my own, of course. So I take Greenpeace reports, all I can find on the journalist side of things, then I read those reports, take those numbers and try to basically make up my mind. So yeah, just to give you, those examples here, production of each PS4 console, and those numbers will make sense again in context when we see, when we compare them. But that's the piece of information we can take from that journalist piece, and that's the estimation that those two material scientists that were ripping PlayStation apart were given. Okay. In other sources, we can find that production of a PS4 takes 30 seconds, fully automated. I mean, if this is true, that's what I found out. I mean, assembling it, right? It's again an estimation. It's probably there's other parts of the process as well included. Well, then, if we want to do this calculation per second in order to be able to make this calculation per hour, because that's usually what you find in all those guides produced by the industry per hour. So I needed to come up with this number to have something. Okay, so again, it's an estimation. It's not about the number per se, but have a look at this one. Now, what we learned in the same games guide, when we learned that the device use is the problem, at the same time they give us, and this is in the Green Games Guide by Yuki, that's the first one, everybody refers to it. Yuki is this association that represents games industry in the UK. That device use is 0.05 kilogram. So, well, if the device used is 0.05 and the production of the device, of course, there are different types of devices on. But this is a little bit shocking, right? And then you go to reports like this one, Guide to Greener Electronics, again by Greenpeace, where you read that 70 to 80% of the energy footprint is happening during the manufacturing phase. And of course, now I'm kind of jumping to the production of consoles, but you can think about the fact that in order to make a video game, of course, we are relying on devices like computers. And again, they have to be produced. And companies today, of course, calculate and try to think about their emissions. It's very hard to come up with a good solution because nobody will calculate actually the cost of the ecological cost of the production of devices on which the company is actually working. The only thing they can do is actually measure the output, the energy that is used and consumed by those devices. So it's all I'm saying, it's such an entangled, it's such a difficult topic. And I think also as academics, there's so, well, what can we do? I think it's important to preach about this to the students so that at least they have this understanding what type of medium you're dealing with. No, not to antagonize it, but to be just aware. But we consume far too much generally, and we produce far too much. It's just a larger picture here. So anyway, if we correlate this, those few numbers, and we could make a lot of experiments like this with, again, the statement that is repeated not only in the Green Games Guide, but in many other industry produced reports, well, I will leave you with that. I'm just scratching the surface here, and I'm almost coming to an end. Materiality and materiality and game studies as a topic or as a framework. These are just a few examples, but we have been engaging with this topic and media theory, media studies as well for quite a while. Surprisingly a lot. We probably all know the Material Turn, this text by, or many of us maybe have stumbled upon it a couple of years back, 2017. But there are new publications popping up. Playful Materialities is a collected volume. Not necessarily, and this is what I'm driving, this is also interesting, this framework of materiality is very broad. So it's not necessarily about this kind of material, like literally earthly reliance of video games and video gaming on resources and labor extraction. Some of those things are as straightforward as this one, material game studies. It's about the materiality of board games, right? So it's a very different thing. But I don't know yet, theory-wise, where I will go with this. I had this idea back in the day that I would love to literally take one example, one game. I think it's impossible though, and make an ethnographic project in which I would track down or try to at least from one title only, somehow kind of retroactively make that story about how it is entangled with all those different dimensions. So, you know, looking at how the game is produced, but also trying to, I don't know, go to a cobalt mine. It's impossible. It's impossible. That person that I showed you at the very beginning, the author of the Cobalt, read a book that was highly dangerous. I think he's the only existing scholar who actually ended up, well, ethnographically sneaking into those areas and actually doing that work. And I wouldn't pass, basically. He could still do it for numerous reasons. Okay, in the German academia, this topic is also quite present. 4 years ago, Navigation. This is if you read German, and a couple of you do, you can find this. It's always free to download online. Zeitschrift für Medien- und Kulturwissenschaft from University Siegen. There was an entire issue devoted to Spiel, Material, and again, lots of different intersections. Okay. Right, takeaways. I guess I don't have to tell us, we are this bunch of people who know that what kind of value material, we can call it material deconstruction, has. The art of close reading, this is again something that I usually, when I present this topic to different audiences, and this is something that happened to me in the past few years, suddenly, I ended up talking about this more to developers than to our folk. Then these are, of course, the stuff that I usually have to mention. The art of close reading and the art of and the role of independent research, not funded by the industry. Okay. Next stop. Where is it going? This is the last thing I want to share with you. I guess we were lucky. There's a lot of us to attract a new project. This project is called Strategies. Sustainable Transition for Europe's Game Industries. We all love those types of abbreviations for EU. But the bottom line is the work package that I designed for this project, I'm really excited to start, is field work. And it's something which is not, I haven't been trained as an ethnographer. But with this topic, with the topic of sustainability, environmental issues, game production, game industry, I just hit the wall as a media scholar coming from literary studies. I just saw that there's only that as much as my method can do. I can, of course, without end, linguistically and content-wise, hermeneutically, take apart those documents and other types of research and quote and requote, but I am just hitting a wall. So this fieldwork essentially, I mean, it's not able to look into the extraction of resources, but it's able to look at this other side of materiality, that is the labor of people who are making games, and also looking at the work cultures and at the shift of this work culture, trying to find out really what happens, not from the PR documents, but trying to find out on different levels in different types of companies, in this case, of course, in Europe, what are the people thinking about it? Is this topic even present in their everyday life, in their everyday work? Does it matter? Or do they think it's greenwashing, right? So this is where it's kind of shifting, and it's, let's say this is where it's taking me. And soon I might have the privilege to work with a very good postdoc who will start at some point in June. And in 2025, we will start the fieldwork and collecting data in numerous companies. So this is where it's going. This is where I'm kind of, looking forward to it. If you want to know more about this project, just have a look We wrote a report. It doesn't sound sexy, but I think it's quite useful as well. And it's a relatively easy read. And that's it from me. I'll end with this. And again, coming from a AAA studio, not meant here ironically or sarcastically, surprising. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that.